fuq is-sajt.
Parisio Nursery. Pet Quarters.
U nilqakom għall-programm tagħna tal-lum Zona Ambjent. Il-ġimgħa li għaddiet bdejna naraw id-dokumentarju mill-aktar interessanti Fragile Mediterranean. Dan huwa dokumentarju bl-Ingliż li aħna qsamnieh fi 3 partijiet. U ċertament huwa wieħed mill-isbaħ dokumentarji li jitratta il-fragilità tal-baħar tagħna, il-Mare Nostrum, il-Baħar Mediterran. Huwa messaġġ qawwi ħafna biex inkomplu inħarsu dana il-baħar tagħna il għaliex naturalment dan huwa mill-iktar ibħra importanti fid-dinja. Il-Baħar Mediterran huwa baħar magħluq u allura iktar hemm bżonn irħtieġa illi nibżaw għal dak kollu illi wara kollox jagħmel minn dana il-baħar wieħed mill-aktar importanti fid-dinja. Ejjew naraw it-tieni parti ta' dan id-dokumentarju Fragile Mediterranean.
Hobby divers and fishermen are banned from this area. Disturbances are to be kept to a minimum. But the freediver's sensitive and unobtrusive technique is ideal. Fred approaches the artificial reef cautiously. He's concerned not to scare any of its residents away, but visibility is very poor and Fred has to move closer. He is completely noiseless. It's his only chance to catch a glimpse of the shy fish.
Je me suis approché par le fond.
I dived from below and approached the reef from below. Above it, I saw a few sea bream there.
Sur le sommet.
Oui, bah c'est intéressant parce que c'est vrai que.
Oh, that's interesting. That's an important fish. And you've surely seen a lot of little fish as well.
Oui, ils sont dans la structure, ils bougent pas.
Yeah, that's right. But I didn't disturb them.
Je les ai pas dérangés.
Sandrine takes pictures of the organisms that have begun to settle here. Algae and invertebrates are the first to take up residence and form the basis of a new food chain.
Yeah, interesting. It's a big structure and a lot of fish just swimming on top of it. And the fish noticed my presence, but they were not too afraid. And then when I started to be really on the reef, they went slowly in open water. But it's interesting to see it works. That structure really works to aggregate fish. It's very interesting.
The developments are documented meticulously. A mass of factors influence the success or failure of the project. Currents, depth, and the structure of the build are all instrumental. But the divers don't just find signs of the gradual settlement of the new reef. Sandrine also finds a fishing net that has got caught in the structure. It is a definite sign that fishermen are ignoring the no-go zone. Artificial reefs are only part of the efforts to bring life back to the coastal waters of the Mediterranean. The most important step was to build sewage treatment works to restore the water quality sufficiently to support life. Sandrine shows Fred the progress made in the structure's settlement. Some fish are beginning to return. They, in turn, will provide food for bigger fish in the future. And the project's success will be directly beneficial for local people too. The small fishermen of Marseille will once again be able to make their living right outside their city. It will take decades for the sea to recover completely. There is now a glimmer of hope. The expedition's next destination is Corsica. This is an exceptional location for divers. The visibility of the water is famous, and there are more than just shipwrecks to explore beneath the waves. Just outside the town of Calvi, an American bomber crashed into the sea. Unlike the wreck of the Donateur, hardly any life has settled here. Perhaps it's simply too small to make an attractive home for fish. Not far away lies the nature reserve of Scondola, where Fred has been given an exceptional permission to dive. For all other divers, this area is a strict no-go zone. The sheer diversity of life here is not at all evident from the word go. But Scondola is home to some exceptional treasures of the Mediterranean Sea. Huge rock outcrops have created an exceptional habitat complete with canyons and rock overhangs that provide secure living quarters for a myriad of creatures. And that applies not only to fish, but also a completely different type of organism, the rare red corals of the Mediterranean. Red corals are strictly protected here. They've been popular assets for jewelry for thousands of years, but over time, their merciless exploitation has reduced their numbers greatly. But the beauty of these corals is most evident when they're still alive. Once turned into jewelry, nothing is left of the fragile coral polyps that once lived in these calcareous structures. Occasionally, there are also completely white corals. The hordes of Javid divers found on the wreck of the Donateur would be a disaster for this finely tuned ecosystem. It would spell the end for this coral colony. But long-term observations have shown that these coral colonies are gradually improving. Harvesting corals has been a long tradition in Corsica. But these days, only a handful of professional coral divers are still allowed to harvest them outside the protected areas. In Bonifacio, in the south of Corsica, Fred meets Jean-Philippe Giordano, one of the last men to make his living from the corals. He's not only a diver, but also crafts the coral jewelry himself, the coralleur has become an extremely rare occupation. Jean-Philippe knows the few hidden places along the coast of Bonifacio where corals can still be found. While Fred dives without the aid of air tanks, just like the coral divers of the past, modern scuba diving equipment allows a much longer search underwater. But despite this, being a coral diver is still very dangerous. The long dives at considerable depths have cost many a coral collector their life. Jean-Philippe collects the corals by hand, and only as many as he can currently work on. One of the reasons why corals cannot be cultivated is that their growth rates are extremely slow, only a few millimeters every year. So it takes decades for the tiny polyps to build up a structure of just a few centimeters. Collecting them is back-breaking work. The coralleur has to leave many corals standing to allow them sufficient time to recover. To follow Jean-Philippe, Fred has to dive to almost 50 meters. There are hardly any corals left in shallower waters. The industrial harvest of corals involves nets that are dragged over the ground and destroy large areas of the seabed completely. It is now strictly prohibited around Corsica. There is hope that over time these protective measures will allow coral stocks to recover here. But the successful search for corals is only the beginning of the coralleur's work. Even today, the most beautiful corals used for jewelry still come from the Mediterranean. While most other types of corals cannot be used for jewelry because they're too brittle, the Mediterranean coral has a particularly beautiful colored, hard calcareous exoskeleton that can be worked on with ease. Legend has it that the corals were made from the blood of the Medusa when Perseus cut off her head. Today, their color only serves as a reminder of the beautiful contrast of the red corals against the blue of the sea. Back at the coast of the French Mediterranean, Fred visits one of the oldest nature reserves here, the island of Port-Caux. It is under constant observation from park rangers to ensure its protection. Port-Caux was turned into a French national park in 1963. It was the first national park in Europe that combines both land and sea. The island is surrounded by a protected zone of 600 meters, which includes a number of smaller islets. Once in private ownership, the island was turned over to the French state by its former owners, under the provision that the island's natural beauty would be preserved and the building of hotels prohibited. Fred meets the representative of the park's management, Nicolas Geratin. He's particularly proud that the endangered stocks of dusky groupers in this protected area are gradually beginning to recover.
The increase in the populations of groupers are very significant because we were counting about 40 groupers in l'îlot de la Gabinière in 1985, and now we are about to 200 on this same place, and altogether it's between 500 and 600 around the island. In 1985 we had something like 40 groupers and about 1,200 dive every year. If you compare 1,200 dive, 1,200 flashlights towards 40 groupers, they might get mad in a few months, you know, because no one of us could stand such a treatment. The other problem was that it's easier to make a photograph of a grouper to make him come towards you than to try and chase him. The groupers love boiled eggs. 40 groupers, 1,200 boiled eggs. They might be sick in a few weeks if everybody brings boiled eggs. So we had to avoid the people and recommend to the divers that they wouldn't bring any food to the fish, because apart from the fish, we need to maintain a biological chain and not interfere with it.
I think the National Park of Porco were a pioneer in a way to use apneists and free divers for scientific work.
The apnea is the best way. It's the most natural way to get into the water, the most silent way without any noise in the water, but also any noise outside when you have to pump the lungs and all the logistic which is behind.
The waters of Porco are now so carefully monitored that to dive here requires a special permission from the National Park authorities. It is only granted if the strict regulations are followed. To conduct population surveys of dusky groupers, the rangers tend to work together with free divers like Fred. It means minimum disturbance to the environment and its inhabitants. Since the fish are curious and not at all shy, they make an easy target for hunters. And although population numbers of dusky groupers in these protected waters have increased tenfold in the last decade, they are still an endangered species. Only during the mating season do the males get a little testy and see anything and anyone as a potential rival. Under the water surface, the visitor is confronted with a myriad of different landscapes. Rocky mountains are dissected with light valleys covered with seagrass. The seagrass meadows are home to an astonishing array of animals and plants, and their dense roots help to stabilize the sea floor. But this delicate carpet is easily damaged by dragnets and ship's anchors. And since seagrass grows and recolonizes only slowly, entire underwater meadows can be quickly and seriously damaged, threatening the survival of the entire habitat. It's a tranquil underwater oasis on the edge. But there is a completely different underwater world, one hidden from view. Fred and Will prepare to meet a particular challenge, a journey into the deep, with no easy escape to the water surface. Caves, dark, hidden, and mysterious. This is a world that puts high demands on the abilities of the free divers. The entrance alone lies 20 meters below the surface. It harbors a bizarre spectacle. Stalactites and stalagmites are witnesses of a bygone age when this cave lay suspended high above the water surface. But what happens if the divers run out of air? It is impossible to resurface right in the middle of the cave. But there is a secret air-filled chamber. Since the oxygen content of this air is very low, they have to use it with care. The divers cannot afford to waste this precious reserve. They will need it for the return journey.
U hemmhekk nagħlqu t-tieni parti ta' dana id-dokumentarju Fragile Mediterranean. Jiena nagħmel appuntamenti ieħor l-aħħar wieħed allura meta naraw it-tielet parti ta' dana id-dokumentarju mill-aktar interessanti. Saħħa lil kulħadd u nerġgħu niltaqgħu ġimgħa oħra.